day after President Trump's former campaign chair pleads not guilty to money laundering. Catalonia's independence leader won't be rushing home. He's gone to Belgium. His lawyer explains why Carles Puigdemont is there.
To have a forum on the world, it's better to be in Brussels than in Barcelona. Brussels is the capital of Europe.
Police in Tokyo arrest a man after finding 9 dismembered bodies at his apartment. 2 severed heads were discovered in a cool box. Hello, welcome to GMT. I'm Lucy Hawkins. Did the Trump campaign collude with Russia to interfere in last year's US presidential election? Well, the Kremlin says the claims are completely groundless, but it is the big question which has dogged Donald Trump's presidency. On Monday, Washington was rocked by the first tangible results of a long-running official inquiry, leading to the arrest of a former chairman of the Trump campaign. But it was the guilty plea from a lesser-known player that is perhaps the biggest story. This man is a former election advisor to Mr. Trump, George Papadopoulos, who admitted lying to the FBI about contacts with alleged go-betweens for Russia while he was working for Mr. Trump. Well, the pressure steps up again later today as well, when social media giants like Facebook will be asked to explain the thousands of posts uploaded by Russian operatives during the election campaign. Laura Bicker has the latest from Washington.
Paul Manafort, Donald Trump's former campaign manager, leaves court under house arrest, facing 12 grave charges, including money laundering and conspiracy. He's pleading not guilty, and the charges don't relate to his work with the Trump campaign. But as he sped away from the spotlight, there came an unexpected bombshell. George Papadopoulos, an unpaid foreign policy advisor for the Trump campaign, secretly pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about his Russian contacts. His charge sheet says that while he was a Trump aide, he met a Russian professor in London who said he had dirt on Hillary Clinton. Despite having earlier told the FBI he wasn't a member of the Trump campaign when the meeting took place. The professor claimed he had thousands of Clinton campaign emails, and Papadopoulos worked to arrange a meeting between Putin and Trump, something that didn't happen.
Papadopoulos' guilty plea discloses facts of communications between the Trump campaign and Russia we didn't know about, and that could be a much bigger problem for Trump.
Meanwhile, more details have emerged of alleged Russian attempts to influence voters on social media. Facebook believes 126 million American users may have come into contact with Russian-backed propaganda during the election. This investigation's not going away, as the White House had hoped, and could overshadow the Trump presidency for some time to come. Laura Bicker, BBC News, Washington.
Well, let's take you to Washington and talk to Dr. Sebastian Gorka, who was Deputy Assistant to President Trump in the White House until just a few months ago. Good to see you. George Papadopoulos pleaded guilty to lying to FBI investigators about his contacts with Russian nationals while he was working for the Trump campaign. Does this not show collusion between the campaign and Russia?
No, it doesn't. This individual was a completely peripheral individual. He was a member of a committee that met once. And if you actually read the charge sheet, there's a very interesting footnote, I think it's page 8, where there's a quote from an email from the actual headquarters of the campaign saying, this guy is clearly puffing himself up. He's selling these kinds of meetings. We want nothing to do with it. So, no, he's a peripheral individual, and he was actually charged with lying to the people he was being interrogated by, not about anything criminal to do with the campaign. So it's all smoke but no fire.
About the fact that we heard candidate Trump calling him an excellent guy in an interview, and we saw that photo of him at that meeting sitting just a few seats away from President Trump, shows that he's surely not an unknown.
Look, who'd heard of him before yesterday? Had you heard of him?
Did you? Had you worked with him?
I was on the transition team. I was actually part of the National Security Council transition team. I worked with General Flynn. I'd never heard of this individual. So one photograph, yes, so what? How many photographs have you been in with people that you don't know?
What about the fact that this does, though, show evidence that Russian government officials were seeking back channels to the Trump campaign?
It doesn't show that. We're talking about his professor at LSE. That's that's not a Russian government official. This person at LSE said, I've got good contacts in the Russian government. That's not a Russian government official. You really need to look at the charge sheet. It has nothing to do with collusion, has nothing to do with conspiracy, and at the same time, we are actually very interested in Clinton paying $12 million for a dodgy dossier made of Russian propaganda.
So you're not worried that Mr. Papadopoulos has spoken to other people since his arrest, and what sort of topics he might have discussed with them and what he might be sharing with the FBI?
Not at all, because he's such a peripheral character that nobody's ever heard of until yesterday. No, I'm not. And I'll tell you what the president told me in the Oval Office about 3 months ago. He said explicitly, and I trust the man, and I've worked for the man, and I know who he is. He said, they will never find anything with regards to me and Russia, because there is nothing. This is just the left's desperate attempts to explain away why Hillary lost, and it's because of who Hillary Clinton is and her ties to Russia.
So if there is nothing there, you're not worried now about Mr. Manafort possibly striking a deal as well with Mr. Mueller?
No, because if you read the Manafort indictment, all 31 pages of it, it's fascinating. It has to do with tax evasion and not disclosing his bank accounts abroad going back to 11 years, 2006. Well, President Trump wasn't even running for office 11 years ago, and it has nothing to do with Russia. It's about avoiding his tax liability here in America. So it's clutching at straws by Mueller and his team.
So he clearly had questionable dealings in the past, though, Mr. Mueller. So it does, though, show perhaps bad judgment. Mr. Manafort, sorry. It clearly does. It clearly does. Sorry, it clearly does show perhaps bad judgment on the part of Mr. Trump that he took him into the campaign. He had such a close position when he did have these questionable dealings.
Well, I think the bigger issue is the fact that he worked with the Podestas and that Tony Podesta resigned yesterday. So I think that the net is tightening around the Clintons and the RNs and the DNC, the Democrat National Congress. So the real collusion conspiracy story is out there, and it's about Hillary Clinton and it's about the Democrats.
Sebastian Gorka, thank you very much for joining us from Washington.
Thanks.
Excuse me. A senior member of Spain's governing People's Party has told the BBC that the sacked leader of Catalonia, Carles Puigdemont, has committed an act of desperation and, as he put it, fleeing Spain for Belgium. Fernando Malo said Mr. Puigdemont's departure indicated that his push for Catalan independence was a mistake and had failed. Mr. Puigdemont has hired a Belgian lawyer specialising in extradition. The deposed Catalan leader is expected to speak in just over an hour's time, as Sarah Corker now reports.
In Barcelona, people are asking just what happens next. The Spanish government is now in charge of running the Catalan region. Carles Puigdemont, the deposed Catalan leader, faces charges of rebellion. Now he's decided to escape.
He comes to Belgium, first of all, I think because it's the capital of Europe, that's first. Secondly, he is here legally, completely legally. He has the right to come here. He is not hiding here. And I think to have a forum on the world, it's better to be in Brussels than in Barcelona.
And speculation is growing that Mr. Puigdemont is preparing to seek asylum in Belgium. He's now potentially a fugitive from Spanish justice. In Catalonia, he won the hearts of these supporters by declaring independence on Friday. But he's left others, like these pro-unity campaigners, furious.
This happening here is like Puigdemont is a dictator. That's it.
I lost a lot of friends. Like, we talk about politics, it's just impossible to talk about.
And this standoff is escalating. Yesterday, the prosecutor in Madrid announced serious charges against Catalan leaders, carrying a maximum sentence of 30 years in prison.
En defensa de la legalidad.
In order to uphold the law, this office has filed charges of rebellion, sedition and misuse of funds against the main Catalan leaders.
And the reaction to that from the sacked Catalan deputy president, Oriol Junqueras, he said he had nothing new to say. And amid reports that other former cabinet members are also in Belgium with Mr. Puigdemont, the potential repercussions of this crisis are now stretching across Europe. Sarah Corker, BBC News.
Reports from Spain say officers from Spain's Civil Guard have raided Catalan police stations as part of inquiries into the disputed referendum on the 1st of October. Sarah Rainsford is in Madrid for us.
I think certainly the government here in Madrid hopes that what it saw and what we saw here in Spain generally in Catalonia on Monday will be the way things will carry on going forward, because there had been calls from Carles Puigdemont and others for civic disobedience, for people to resist the application of direct rule from here in Madrid. That didn't happen. There were no human chains around government buildings. Mr. Puigdemont himself didn't try to go back to work. So essentially, it carried on as business as usual. And I think perhaps the fact that such serious charges, criminal charges, are being sought against the Catalan independence leaders might be possibly one reason for that. I think it is acting as a deterrent. Madrid is obviously showing that it will take serious steps against any of those involved in what it calls an illegal push for independence. And clearly, on the ground in Catalonia, that's having an effect.
Sarah Rainsford there. Let's update you now on some other news. Netflix has announced the end of its political drama House of Cards. The day after its star, Kevin Spacey, was accused of making a sexual advance towards a teenage boy in the 1980s. Netflix says it was deeply troubled by the allegation, but insisted it had already made the decision months ago that the upcoming 6th season, now being filmed, would be the last. A Chechen man accused of plotting to murder the Russian president has been injured and his wife killed. Officials said Adam Osmayev and Amina Okuyeva's car was ambushed just outside of Kiev. Both had volunteered to serve in the Ukrainian military's campaign against pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine. The Bank of England has predicted up to 75,000 jobs could be lost in the UK's financial services sector if Brexit negotiations fail to produce a trade deal with the European Union. It's warned financial firms to be prepared to lose their right to trade across the EU. Do stay with us here on BBC World News. Still to come. Hundreds of refugees refuse to leave an Australian-run detention centre due to close today because of fears for their safety.